This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. As we continue our conversations covering the NBA and our coveted Autopsy report, we got two more teams to put into the casket, bury them off, put them on the slab, zip them up, body them up. And as always, man, love talking to talk NBA dead talk with my man 50 Grand, www.shawsports.net. Big on the PNC, my man Mr. Warren Shaw, ripping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. What's good, Mr. Shaw? I know life is you have to be full of life, but I'm also full of morbidity.
Well, as always, it's a pleasure to be here with you, my friend. And we will see what's going on here in this week's Autopsy report. Two teams, one in particular that's actually first up, that dramatic improvement. So I think of all the teams we've discussed right now, this is a team that has the highest ceiling and potential to maybe break that play-in, at least a play-in ceiling next year. Really, really excited about what their prospects are looking like. So this will be one of the more optimistic autopsy reports that we've done here in the last few weeks.
Yeah, listen, the teams that we're going to be talking about this week are going to be the Houston Rockets and the Utah Jazz. And I think what's really cool about, the parity that's taking place right now in the NBA is a year ago we were talking about the Utah Jazz like we'll be talking about the Houston Rockets. And now, we may be having a completely, 180 conversation as we're talking about the Utah Jazz, and an unexpected conversation that we will be having about the Houston Rockets. So, I think that speaks and lends itself to how quickly an organization can turn things around when they reprioritize, when they change their direction, when they may even change their culture, or they insert someone who has the capabilities of helping to change a culture, so that you start seeing results from that. And I think that's going to be one of the more important points of conversation to have when we're talking about the Houston Rockets and the Utah Jazz in kind. So, this is going to be a great conversation to have. And again, it's one of the reasons why we choose to do these autopsy reports, because I just want to give people an understanding about what the expectations are for these teams coming in, what we saw from this past season, and whether or not all of this is just in a one-year vacuum or something that is sustainable, right? Like there's opportunity for sustainability and there to be success that can grow from it, man. So it's really exciting when you do kind of break it down and you look at some of these teams and say, is there hope for them moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think really two good teams here in the Western Conference. One was obviously eliminated a little earlier than the other here. Houston had some life literally into the final 10 days, and it hit a tough skid, but ultimately got to 500, which will obviously dive into, that level of improvement from a season ago. So some optimism here, as alluded to here on the Autopsy report, brother.
Absolutely. So as always, be sure to get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA, or get at me at Game Face Lee. The show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline, available on all the major platforms. You know where to find us. Also go to www.thebaselinenba.com to check out not just this episode, but also our previous episodes. And if you see the blue and white logo and you see us on the YouTube channel, you know that your boys are rocking with the 19 Media Group family. So as always, be sure to go check out www.the19mediagroup.com to check not only us, but also the family of great content creators, whether it's music, sports, culture, entertainment, you name it. 19 Media Group has got it. So be sure to check us and all of our fam out. We got great stuff lined up for you guys, especially for this upcoming week. So with that being said, Shaw, let's focus our attention autopsying the Houston Rockets. As we are talking about this team, final game of the regular NBA season. This is a team that wasn't able to finish at 500, but they were pretty much right there, knocking on the door of possibly being a play-in team. And then they just ran through a rough patch where they just couldn't execute when it's necessary. Listen, credit to Ime Udoka, Shaw. Under the scrutiny that he's been, there's one thing that you cannot take away from. This guy doesn't let whatever is going on via the media or his personal life deter from what he shows you as an NBA head coach. And who knows what the Boston Celtics may look like with him under leadership. But we know what the Houston Rockets look like under his leadership. And this is a team that has made a surprising turnaround. And while they had some really great offseason acquisitions, they pieced together a team that really reflects the identity of Ime Udoka. The fact of the matter is those guys still have to go out there and play for Udoka. And it looks like that's exactly what they did, with a 40-plus win team.
Yeah, 19 game turnaround from a season ago. 19 games. And truly we're on the precipice of scaring the bejesus out of the Warriors, although Draymond Green said otherwise, for that final play-in spot. Udoka is a good basketball coach. Again, maybe not the greatest human with the most scruples, but a good basketball coach who's definitely getting things done, where it counts, between the lines. Dylan Brooks, Fred VanVleet, all great additions to this roster. Sengün was having a masterful season, then went down. With him going down, it allowed Jalen Green to take the step that I think we were expecting him to take statistically all throughout the course of the year. So it'll be interesting to see what that looks like when both guys are healthy, as Jalen has hey, I can be a true offensive hub if need be. They had to rely on him, or does he kind of go back and let Sengün become, the mini Jokic of that team? But all signs point to a roster that's improving. While I think they got Cam Whitmore as a steal, and I know there are some questions about his personality and work ethic and all those things, he's 19 years old, so he'll be 20 going into next year. I think he'll be a great addition for them coming off the bench, giving them some offensive firepower. And as you alluded to, Udoka's going to make them play defense. All signs are pointing up, I think, for this Rockets team, assuming everybody can stay healthy. And now, can they become a little bit of a destination for free agent guys on the fringe? Jeff Green played really good for them as well. Can they keep him in tow to kind of continue that veteran presence? But I think other guys are going to be looking over at Houston and say, you know what? It's not a bad situation. Let me go play with those young guys. And a great second year from Jabari Smith Jr. as well, too.
Listen, a lot of great things, Shaw, but you also spoke to there's a lot of interesting question marks that I think will essentially be answered come this offseason. Give credit to Raphael Stone. He did a fabulous job, putting together this roster. I'm more so of the mindset, do you keep what you have and let Udoka work what he's been working with these guys over this past year, right? Because if not the injuries, we could be having a different conversation. Remember, Steven Adams went down with an injury, right? He could have been a solid role player. I'm just wondering, do you look to continue to tweak this roster? Or because you have such a young and a very good balance of seasoned veterans with youthful upside, do you continue to keep messing with what you got?
So I think with Houston, when it comes to changes, they ultimately decide now, are they a destination? Do they want to cash in any future draft capital to bring another potential all-star to this team? Or do you just kind of let it cook? And I think they're going to let it cook a little bit. I wouldn't really mess with the combination of VanVleet and Green, although, again, it's been reported that Green was on the trading block. But I think he's proven that he can be somebody who you can try to build with, if not necessarily around. I like what Udoka's been able to do, I think, in terms of implementing his X's and O's, especially defensively. And to me, this is just something that you continue to ride out, at least for another year. It says hey, can we actually get into the play-in or playoffs next year? If we don't have the injuries, if we don't start so late, another year of Whitmore developing, what do we really have? They're in a better situation than a lot of teams. Now, again, I'm not predicting a 19-game improvement. I'm not predicting an OKC level improvement from last year to next year. But I think they can scratch the surface because they were doing well to begin the year, right? We were like, oh, look at what Udoka's doing. Then they had that stretch in the middle that was very rough, and they got hot again. I think they won 10 straight. So there's a little bit of just finding a level of consistency with this roster that still needs to happen, but that still comes with maturity, especially when you have Sengün and Green as kind of and Jabari Smith as the focal points, while VanVleet and Brooks are veteran leaders. Those three guys are kind of what's making it go, and they still just need to learn how to play in the NBA.
I feel Sengün has another gear in him. it's weird. I don't want to put him in the same conversation as Jokic. What I'm saying is that I think his trajectory can elevate to something like Jokic, right? Where you see the skill sets in various ways, and then there's just going to be this 1 year where I just think it comes together. Now, I don't know if he's going to post those kind of Jokic numbers that you see out there in Denver, right? But I feel like if Sengun completes a regular season and is giving you what he's shown you from year 1, year 2, and is why he's really high in your list, Shaw, I think you don't need like this nominal jump from Jalen Green. You just need to continue to see him elevate and elevate. And I think with the sound play that you get from Van Fleet and from some of the other role players out there, you get some, quality points. Again, Van Fleet doesn't have to be the guy, right? He doesn't. The eyes don't have to be on him, but he's such a sound ball handler. He's such a sound guard that he really does make Green and he does make Sengun better. And I feel like that's buying time for Udoka to really put his imprint on both of those two guys. And, they very well could have the level of ascension, so to speak, that doesn't require you have to go out and really go and dig for like, a top end free agent type of person. Because at some point you're going to have to rely on your homegrown talent to elevate themselves to be in that conversation of being all NBA, right? And so I just think that there is an opportunity there for those two guys to do that, playing around and within a structured system that's going to accentuate each of these guys' distinguishable skill sets. This is a great opportunity, especially for Sengun, to be able to do that, because I feel like Udoka sees a lot of Duncan in him. You know what I mean? Like he sees the ability that you could play through Sengun while he can still get his. Everybody also can get better. Then you're playing it back and forth between him and Van Fleet. I mean, the sky's the limit, literally. And in Green, if he improve his shot, you know what I'm saying? And Brooks, they improve their shots. Now you've got a team that can spread out, but now you also have got a team that can hammer you in the half-court game as well, too.
No, for sure. And we didn't even talk about Amen Thompson and the season that he had, and especially defensively and the intangibles that he can bring. So if he continues to work on his offense, be impactful on the defensive side that he's shown to be, be an irritant specifically defensively, that just is, again, it's another level with Whitmore potentially as well. I think what becomes an interesting conversation or a question is the future of the Jayshawn Tate and even Torrey Eason to a lesser degree. Eason was hurt a lot this year, and I know Udoka planned on utilizing him had he been available for the majority part of the year. But does he kind of get in the way? I don't want to say, maybe that's too casual a statement, but can all those guys get minutes and eat and develop at the same time when, and assuming if healthy? Amen was hurt for a good part of the year as well too. So that's where it's like, all right, you have some foundational pieces that that you have at the top. I think with Jabari, Jalen, and Sengun, but then it's like that next tier down of complementary role players that you want to go out there and get you minutes. And I think Amen is probably the brightest star of them all. But Torrey Eason was a very nice surprise a couple seasons ago, and I think Udoka really would like to continue to see what he can do with him as well too. So that to me is where you're right. I don't necessarily know that they're going to go out here and sell off their draft picks to add some other superstar to this mix. I think they have some young guys that they want to see, including the stars that they have within their starting lineup, and the next wave of rotation guys and Amen and Cam Whitmore on the bench.
I don't want to make a big deal out of this thing, but I do want to ask you, because you mentioned Torrey Eason. Do you think his antics and what he did, with taunting the Warriors or whatever the case may be, calls into question his maturation? And whether or not that reflected sourly on Udoka, and especially going into this offseason, or do you think this will incentivize Udoka to really get at him in the offseason to be like, yo, if you're going to aim for the king, you best not miss, especially at the expense of your team?
Right. Yeah. Let's back it up on the court, young fella. Let's. And I think Udoka is going to be in that mode. Hey, I love the confidence. I love that you believe in the rest of the guys here, but you personally can't even help us right now on the floor. So I think focus on you getting healthy and then staying on the floor to really be able to back up what you're talking. I don't think Udoka minds the talk as much, and even who it's against. I think it's just understanding like you can't even play. So Eason is somebody who they'll obviously take another look at. It'd be interesting to see if he goes to summer league. Probably too rudimentary for him in terms of his development, or he'll go out there, maybe play 2 games and just to get the reps in and then just continue his off court stuff. But he's somebody that I know they are relying on, but he and Amen, I think, have some really, really great futures in their rotation of Udoka that can make the Rockets uber competitive going into next season. And I'm glad you touched on the addition of Steven Adams, even from that locker room presence, because the same thing, as a veteran guy, he could be like, look, Tori, we don't need that right now. We're trying to get in here. So let's just focus on getting these dubs.
Absolutely. So final thoughts here when we talk about the Houston Rockets, Shaw. This is a basketball team that I think by all accounts, there's a lot of room for improvement across the board. I think there's an opportunity for improvements if you shoot the basketball better. They can certainly get better at shooting the 3. They can certainly get better at their ability to shoot from the free throw line. They're not sound when it comes to their ability to move the basketball as well. They were like bottom 3rd in assists in the league.
Yeah.
But I think that comes with the kind of skill set you're getting from your backcourt combination. Where is it that you want to see the most improvement given? Do you want to see that next level improvement on the young talent as much as it is based on what you're getting from your veteran guys? Because this is the first year that Van Fleet and Brooks are playing under Udoka, two very distinguished styles of coaching when you're talking about Brooks under Jenkins and then Van Fleet under Nurse. So what are your expectations for the veteran guys as far as taking a step forward, to move that backcourt into another elevated space of being, an elite combo?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question because the backcourt, really is Van Vliet and Green, I guess, taking on some pseudo backup point guard duties at times. Aaron Holiday was on this roster, had a couple moments, for them too. But I think if there's something to address, is not necessarily even just the continued maturation of the young guys or the continued presence of the veteran guys. Is like they may want to go out and get a more suitable backup point guard to kind of help initiate offense and take some pressure off Van Vliet, who also is, I would say long in the tooth here. But he's diminutive to some degree, and he also tends to miss a couple games, per season. So to me, that's something that they can utilize, because I don't necessarily think that Jalen Green is that guy. He can do it in a pinch or maybe for some really short stretches of games. But I don't think you want him with primary playmaking duties as a full-time backup point guard. What do they do with their draft pick, which will probably be in the late teens here, especially with their success, unless they get super, super lucky. But that's something that they can try to go out and scout and try to continue to improve that way. But at some point, you don't want to necessarily have 7 young guys who you're trying to develop on this team, right? We've already mentioned, I think, about roughly 5. And so that veteran presence is going to be need, or those young guys need to be acting like veterans, sooner than later.
Yeah, good stuff, man. Like to me, there's just so much upside that really can be done. Like, because even if to what we're talking about, Shaw, and there's a lot of things that could be that could be looked at, tweaked, adjusted, all of it. You're not necessarily risking anything that's going to set a team that just essentially elevated themselves 19 games better than what they showed you the year previously. So obviously, even from here, ground level, this is a team at the very minimum that can get you 37 wins. Easy, right? I think the question is, what can elevate you to the point where you're now 45, 47 win type basketball team? And I think it's got to be the collective togetherness that this team shows through the offseason, the work that they put in, and where they improve on certain aspects of their game that has been marginally, that's been compromised at times based on the matchups of most of the teams that they played against, that they struggled against through the course of the regular season.
Yeah, real talk. But 2 big things loom over this. I think Sengün and Jalen Green are extension eligible this summer, so they'll have the team options, but I think they'll be able to get deals done. So at what number do they bring those guys back, or do they just play it out and then go into? But I think it's like they'll have the summer and then going into October, I believe it is, to get some deals done, for those 6th and 7th years. Going to be really interesting. I see what numbers what that is. Sengün, probably in the 30 million range, maybe Green the same. That's a lot of cheese. That's a lot of cheddar, especially when you're playing Van Beet $45 million, for the next 2 seasons. But the Rockets, I think, will feel like both Sengün and Green are going to be worth that cheddar, and hopefully to keep this roster continuity moving forward in the coming seasons.
Absolutely. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Coming up, we're going to focus our attention on the Utah Jazz. Team just a couple of seasons ago, we were talking about wow, this team out of nowhere may have overachieved and, certainly on the come up of conversations to, not just be a play-in team, but even be a good enough team maybe to ascend to the playoffs. They've taken a step back, but is the step back so far back that we don't have confidence that they'll be able to regain that momentum that they gave us almost 2 seasons ago? So you don't want to miss out on that. But first, did you know that there's a whole collection of Black-led products that fit into your daily routine and lifestyle that you can get at Walmart? And it's so important that we show Black founders some love, not just during Black History Month, but all year long. Because every time we buy a Black-led brand, we're making room or creating demand for other Black-led brands. Black founders and the products they bring to the table are creating a whole new world of choices at Walmart. Some of the products I want to check out are Natural Vert Granola, Zac and Zoe Honey, Scotch Porter Beard Balm, and Partey Cookies. Go to walmart.com/Black and Unlimited to discover all the amazing Black-owned products that you can add to your daily routine. More Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw. Don't go away. And we are back, Callie Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast, as we continue our conversation, the coveted Autopsy report. Next team that we're putting on the slab, Shaw, the Utah Jazz. Disappointing season, I guess you could say, for the Utah Jazz, albeit a little bit of a quirky season, though. I mentioned it in the lead up to this. This was a team a couple of years ago, man, that they were on the precipice of being a play-in team. And now, only 30 plus wins this year. But at least from the first half of the season, they looked like a basketball team that was going to be competitive, is going to kind of hang in there. And then things just fell apart on the second half of the season. I guess the question for you, Shaw, or the question that I think some people really should be thinking about is, can they regain the momentum that they were giving us, from a season or two ago? Like Danny Ainge coming in, getting Lauri Markannen, pooling together some of these young talented guys, getting all of these draft assets and stuff like that. Like, part of us was getting this, like, oh, okay, I see a plan. I see something coming from this. And then you start seeing the guys actually going out there and executing and playing basketball. They moved away from, Quinn Snyder. Now, we're saying to ourselves, okay, 30 wins, is that really what it's going to look like for this team for the next 3-4 years? Or was this just a setback due to the circumstances of injuries and just things didn't play favorably for the Utah Jazz this past season?
I don't know. I'll be very honest with you. I'm not quite sure who Utah wants to be right now. If you would have asked me who is going to be the worst defense in the entire league this year, midway point or any point this year, I would have said the Washington Wizards, hands down. Somehow the Utah Jazz found themselves with the 30th ranked defense this year at season's end. Maybe not by a lot, but somehow they've outpaced the Wizards for the worst defense this year. That is blasphemous to me. I just don't understand it, especially from a Will Hardy led team who I know, again, they weren't great in defense last year. They're still like 21st or whatever it was, but I know their principles in essence in there. I think they just seem to lose all sense of that, this season, in addition to, making the trade and moving off of Olynyk. So you go from what was a good story, a season ago, an unexpected story, like, oh man, they could get in the playing team. And, we had the Utah reporter on, and, currently they were the top team in the Western Conference at one point last season. Like, I think it was late December-ish. Wow, things are really going well. Now you just don't know who this team is. Walker Kessler has been the ultimate Uchiwali or one Mike. Like he was all Uchiwali this season. My guy, I don't know who that guy was and what semblance of a season he was trying to set forth. And now you have roster decisions because there's not a lot of guys on this roster signed under contract, and you're going into the last year of Lauri Markkanen's deal as well. So I think it's like, well, do you trade Markkanen now? Because he's going to want an extension, obviously, and that's going to be a pretty hefty number, probably the $35 to $40 million range, just because of the way salaries are currently right now. And is he your building block? Clearly Kessler's not the building block. John Collins had a pretty good season, all things considered, although he was being shipped and bantered about, for a good majority of the year. And so to me, this is a situation now where I don't really like the smell of things, I think, in Utah. And while I know Ainge is a very good general manager and they have some picks that are coming down the line next year or this year, I guess in 2024, there's not a lot of return there. It's a lot of stuff coming in the future for the Rudy Gobert situation. So are they willing to move into that and give up some of that capital to try to make a move here now, in addition to figuring out what they're doing with Markkanen? I don't know why they re-signed Clarkson. It's a friendly number. And I guess it's still movable, but he's owed 2 years. They didn't trade Taylor Horton-Tucker, so he just comes off the books. Not that they could have got much for him, but maybe they could have got a second round pick if they would have moved him. There's a lot of curious decision, I think, that the Utah Jazz are now left with by kind of tanking and then not moving off of more guys once they did the Olynyk thing at the trade deadline.
So I found it interesting that you said, do you build off of Lauri Markkanen? And I was thinking maybe after given what we're seeing is that maybe there's more confidence that they build off of Keyonte George. No?
Is that a question or a statement? So, I mean, because do you feel like did you see enough from Keyonte George to be like, okay, he's the guy, right? Especially with Sexton still there too. And not that you don't build Keyonte because Sexton is there, but there's some duplicity in their skill set.
I obviously, but I think to me, I think that's the bigger question. Is it that you need the guy or you're looking for guys, right? And so when I say that, I mean, Keyonte George, if you're saying he should be the guy by no stretch of the imagination, he only averaged 13 points per game or whatever. But what you saw from him on the floor, can you honestly say that was what you were getting from your top end players, Markkanen, even from Clarkson, even from Collins, who these guys took up, boatloads of the minutes, right? I'm just saying that, like, what I saw from Keyonte George reminded me a lot like of what I was seeing from, Spider Mitchell, minus the fact that he wasn't as offensively explosive. But I just wonder if, what the Utah Jazz are accumulating as far as talent goes and assets goes, is that benefiting a guy like Keyonte George on this roster? Is that benefiting any other young player that you're putting on that roster to play next to those type of guys, those type of seasoned veteran players, right? And I just don't, I see where it's just not meshing. I just see where it's not connecting together. And I think that's where a part of that hard decision, has to be made. If you're still going to continue with Will Hardy as the head coach, is he resting his laurels on building on a roster around, say, Keyonte George and Lauri Markkanen, or are you building around a roster of Lauri Markkanen and whoever wants to step up to the plate? Because nobody else has been able to do that. To me, I'm just saying that I saw more from Keyonte George than I saw from the rest of the other guys out there. I see numbers, but I don't see where anything was tangible or anything was impactful, given the fact that these guys had those minutes on the time on the floor. And I feel like more coaches and people will be preparing more for a guy like Keyonte George and what he can give you from the backcourt than I'm seeing what you're dealing with, even from what you're getting from the front court. And that was just my perspective.
Well, I don't necessarily know that you have to make a decision on George just now. Maybe if you're saying just in terms of direction, not like you're not getting rid of him because he's signed for a while. But I think in terms of like, are you going to give him the keys and then move Markkanen out of there? I think, if you can pay Markkanen because it's hard to find somebody with his skill set. There's not a lot of 24 and 10 guys just like hanging around out there. Right. But I think it's like there needs to be some semblance of true direction. So to your point, is George, a suitable building block, to pair alongside Markkanen if you can revive whatever happened with Walker Kessler this year and continue to kind of plug in, on the fringes, if you will. I don't know that Kenny Lofton Jr. is as good as he's shown in the final 5 games of the season, with the Utah Jazz. But he's earned a spot, right?
But listen, I love KLJ, man. I don't know if whether or not that's a person that could fit for what the Jazz are doing, but listen, if he thrives, does he not make, Collins and I don't want to say Kessler, but does he not make, all the other power forwards that you're paying money for that you're not getting a whole lot out of, make them, look expendable, because you can keep Lofton on the cheap. You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm wondering. But you're not going to be able to. He's not going to replace, the guys that you would currently have just yet, because he doesn't have enough games under his belt. You know what I'm saying? And on the NBA level. But I certainly think that he is someone who can certainly contribute. For a Utah Jazz, I think they're starving, for guys to step in and soak up some minutes. To be able to help produce, and maybe even in some ways prevent them from being absolutely the worst defensive team in the NBA.
Yeah, and that's stuff that just has to get better. And while they shuffled in a lot of guys, I think they had 20-something players put down a Utah Jazz uniform for this year. That's a lot, and a lot of guys where we were talking about Memphis a couple of weeks ago, like, who are these people? So Utah Jazz had a lot of that going on themselves. Right. And I think deliberately so. But one thing I did wanted to highlight was John Collins has had a really good year, and while he was much maligned and, we were joking going into the trade deadline, hey, they would trade him for a bag of chips or whatever it was, 15-8, over 50% from the floor. He shot 37% from 3. He had a good season. But that's still only going to get you so far. I don't know that it's pretty alongside Markkanen, but they have some guys there who are suitable NBA level talent. And now, with only, I think it is 8 or 9 guys signed for next year, with all varying degrees of different skills, how does Ainge put this thing back together to allow Will Hardy to be like, all right, listen, I want to be competitive? Because I don't think Hardy wants to be a development coach. I think he wants to be a competitive coach, fighting for the playoff spot. And that's where the Utah Jazz ultimately now to kind of figure out, okay, what is their identity? And are you going to start to cash in on some of the draft capital that you have, and maybe try another player away? But so what are they going to do with Colin Sexton and the combination of Keyonte George? I don't know.
So you're saying that the Jazz should consider keeping Collins?
I mean, he's under contract for another 2 years, so he had a good season. So he's owed what is it?
But even a good season could also mean, listen, if the direction of this team doesn't really fit, right, with or Collins doesn't fit with what the direction is with this team because of what he gave you, that means that you could probably see about moving him and maybe getting a little something back because his trade value is high. It's not like he's sloppy Joe material. I mean, the guy, he's always been like this. But I guess to me, Shaw, it's like when it matters the most, like where does the productivity really kind of, accentuate the player in that regard? And so that to me is where I wonder if you're a guy like Keyonte George, if you're any guy, you draft, you bring a guard in, whatever. Is the guard going to make Collins, Markkanen, and however many else, those guys even, exceptionally better than what the numbers already gave you right now? And they've been, doing a mishmash. And listen, remember, I was high on Colin Sexton. And, listen, he averaged 18 points per game this season and stuff like that. But even then, those numbers, what do they actually mean? Because I thought that he had an opportunity for him to be the guard for the Utah Jazz. So now what we're basically saying is that the backcourt is still in question, because I don't think anybody's coming in a situation with any confidence that, all right, we have our solid 5, right? We got maybe a solid 2.
No, I mean, I think everything is in question, right? So with Kessler having a down year, do you want to play Collins and or Markkanen at small ball 5 consistently? They're both undersized for that position. So Markkanen has been oscillating between 3, 4, and 5 now for the last 3 years. And with success, offensively, but I think defensively, you still have to kind of figure out what that is. And then you talked about, Keyonte George, but then who are who are the wings? Who are the true wings on this team? And I would challenge you to find somebody that you're excited about, and in their overall development. And that's where they need to get better at, because this is a wing heavy league. Like, everybody's looking for those guys, and Utah doesn't really have anybody of any real consequence that is scaring anybody, or that you'd even want to try, like, say, what, let me really, really develop this individual. And even some of the guys they had are coming off the books, at least mathematically, going into the summer. So that's where Ainge needs to focus on. What can they do in terms of the draft? Do they move one of their picks, in the future, to maybe pry in, a not necessarily a disgruntled wing, but a promising young wing, from another team, just to give them some wiggle and shake, for that development piece that they seem to be missing.
This to me, this team, the way this team is set up, this to me would be one of the teams where, if there's ever a time that there's a free agency possibility to shore up a little bit of the weaknesses that you're talking about, this would be a great chance or a great opportunity for them to take advantage of it. And I know that free agency destination is not Utah, right? But trade wise, they can do something and sneak their way into being a successful team where they can reinsert themselves, reinsert the idea that, that's a destination where you can get some success.
Well, let's break that down really quickly, though, right? So tradable pieces that they have, assuming you want to keep Markanen, then it is John Collins, because of the salary, $26 million, or Collins Sexton at $18 million. Nice spots, in essence, to try to get some talent back. Because if you're just trading a draft pick, that won't match salary cap wise. So you've got to try to match some money. And those are the only two guys really that make some sense for them, that they can probably utilize. Jordan Clarkson, you can throw in there too, with the $14 million as well. But everybody else is $5 million, $4 million, or, young guys who you can't really get anybody of any real consequence coming back. Right. So, you can try to sign and trade somebody, but I mean, even that, you would just be doing it to a number. And I don't think the team, if you let's say you resign Taylor Horton Tucker and say you want to give him $20 million, which would be a terrible mistake, but just because you're trying to make salaries match, well, what team is taking that on? It's like, okay, give me Taylor Horton for $20 million, and I'll give you whatever wing, plus the whatever pick you're giving me back. That's where I think Utah, again, it's a precarious situation, and it gives me some semblance for pause, despite the faith that I have in Danny Ainge. I'm just like, all right, well, I don't think he made the moves that he needed to make soon enough, even though he has draft capital in the bank from the Rudy Gobert trade 2 years ago.
So you find that the Walker-Kessler down year really impacted a lot of maybe.
I'm concerned. I'm concerned. Yes, he had some injury stuff going on, but he just didn't look like the same guy that was impactful at the last part of last year. And that would give me a lot of reason for pause. And again, he's not going to be this offensive hub, whatever. I think he was a rebounding threat, block shots, and he still blocked, a ton of shots this year in the time that he was there. But even just being, a guy who can put stuff back, I would say a lob threat, but again, could catch some stuff at the rim from time to time as well. All those things seem to regress. The defense and the blocking shots were still there, but he just wasn't the same guy and as impactful as he was last year. And that's problematic.
All right, so let's properly eulogize the Utah Jazz. With everything that you've said, it doesn't sound like there's a whole lot of confidence that they're going to be able to take a step forward, from the 30 wins that they amassed this past, this regular season, right? So, like, they're going to probably be hanging around that same area, or maybe even regress further.
It's a great question. One of the things that they also have to do is, right now they're only at $94 million in committed salary next year. So none of the guys we've talked about kind of ad nauseum, even Chris Dunn, right? He was solid for them, but what number do you bring him back at? Well, you don't want to sacrifice future cap flexibility either, especially in a bad draft class. So there's a lot of things that don't make sense for Utah going into next year, which is like, damn, they could be the same or foreseeably even worse than they were this year. That, to me, they still need to get to the minimum salary floor. Remember, you got to do that by the beginning of the year this year, moving forward by the new CBA agreement. So, Kenneth Lofton Jr., Chris Dunn, Taylor Horton Tucker, like, what are those numbers? Are you giving them, 10 million with like team options, on the back end? Do they accept that? Maybe they do. Probably they do. And then fine, you can fill out the roster and get to the minimum floor, but it doesn't give you the talent upgrade that I think is necessary to take that next step. So that's where, again, Utah is in a little bit of arrears, at least in my opinion, because there's just the rubber isn't meeting the road here in the way that they'd like it to.
All right. Well, listen, I do think that the Utah Jazz has a lot of things to figure out in this offseason. I do think that with Danny Ainge and listen, he was our former executive for the Boston Celtics. He'll figure out a way. He will. That doesn't mean that he's going to elevate this team to the level of success that he had the luxury and the mystique of having Celtic grandeur and allure. But I think that he's established himself to be very savvy enough that he can't have a crap product out there on the court. So at some point, he's going to probably have to figure it out. But I do think it does raise a lot of questions, Shaw. I think what it also does is it's going to accelerate the timeline and what kind of decision-making processes you're going to have on the talent that you have, right? Markkanen, Keyonte George, Walker Kessler, all of those guys. I think knowing that the clock is ticking on the veteran guys that you have the opportunity to move if you can move them, and then what you're looking to re-sign some of the guys that you're wanting to retain, you're going to have to up your window of decision making on whether or not the look of what your team is going to be composed of, because I think that's what's going to drive what kind of decision making process you're going to have over the next couple of seasons. To your point, given the fact that the depth in the draft class is going to be very marginal at best.
Yeah, bad draft class, bad free agent class. So at least what people are saying. So that's just a hard place to be in, for a team that clearly should be looking to make a move up, but just may not have the bandwidth to do so next year. So they may have to wait another year and take a step back, unfortunately.
All right. Good stuff all together, Shaw. I thought that you probably would have just completely torched the Utah Jazz, but you at least gave a little bit of hope. Just a little.
I mean, I don't know that I did, fam. I'm kind in my assessment of it, but it's rough right now. And the only thing, not the only thing, but you can hang your hat on the fact that Ainge is going to make decisions that obviously are in the best interest, and he usually does a good job in that aspect. So something will come of it, and there's probably a deal we just don't know about right now. But looking at it black and white, it looks tough. It just looks tough because there's not a whole lot of more than serviceable talent on this roster right now. It's very top heavy and young, where it does have some good chops. Everything else in the middle is kind of just like,
All right, good stuff all around, Shaw, man. And again, this is why we do the autopsy. I think this is the last one, right? The last round of autopsies we're doing. Now we're going to focus our attention on the NBA playoffs, which is days away, right? Once we get past the play-in situation and stuff. So that's going to be exciting to
those 9 and 10 losers will be joining us very soon over here in the autopsy lab.
That's true. I feel like we'll be burying them twice. That means you'd have to listen to our play-in previews.
Please do.
You know what I'm saying? Whether you are listening it too late or you're listening to it just in time. So, but yeah, no, that's true. We got to make sure we cover those 9-10 losers. Got to make sure we properly eulogize them as well too. So thank you for keeping me honest about that, sir.
Anytime, brother. That's what we're here for.
Once again, we'd like to thank you and yours for hopping on board with us this week for the Baseline. Callie, Warren, Shaw, we appreciate you guys. We do. And we'll catch up with you next time.